Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with jazz saxophonist and composer Seamus Blake. Originally from England and raised in Vancouver, Canada, this New York City cat has had a very long and savory 24-year career. He is still on the heels of promoting his 2015 CD Superconductor, and he's always a busy cat. During that very same year of 2015, he was on a project nominated for a Grammy Award with the great pianist Gonzalo Bubalcaba. In 2002, he took first place in the Thelonious Monk International Jazz Sax Competition in D.C., and as the winner, he got to perform with the legends Wayne Shorter and Herbie Hancock. To date, he's released 16-plus albums and has much more to say about himself and in the world of jazz. So get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
Thank you for taking a little time out to talk with me today. I appreciate it.
No problem.
So I'm going to go ahead and start off here. I know you're pretty good about talking about your activity that's going on with your music world, but in your own words, just kind of get me up to date with what's going on with you lately.
I'm about to go to Europe. I'm going to play some gigs in Europe with a trio, and after that I come back and I have a few gigs with Antonio Sanchez's band in Mexico, and then that's it for the year. And then next year, I'm traveling a bunch, doing some gigs with. I'm leading some different bands in Europe, like some different European kind of groups. So I'll be in the UK doing a tour in February, and I'll be doing a tour of France and Spain, and that with two separate European groups. I'm trying to promote my latest record a little bit, and I still sometimes freelance for other people, play in other people's groups, and that. So usually that's what I'm mostly doing.
Well, speaking of your latest album, which is 2015's Superconductor, talk to me a little bit about this album. How do you feel about it? And it seems like you had a pretty good power lineup going on with this album.
Going into it, I wanted to make a record with a buddy of mine that I met in Berkeley when I was in college. Scott Kinsey, and we'd been friends over the years and had played some, and but had never really recorded anything together. And he's a specialist in synthesizers and that. So I wanted to make a record that had some of those kinds of flavors. I'd also been playing the iwi and interested in that instrument for a while, so I was working on that and exploring that, and I wanted to document some of the tunes that I had been writing with that instrument as well. At the same time, it was a new label for me. I had done a recording with Gonzalo for one of Gonzalo's records. The label asked me if I would like to do something for their label, and so part of my inspiration and inclination was to write some music that could also feature Gonzalo on some songs, so I wanted to write some things that might be kind of along his alley. And so listening to his music and that, I was reaching for some of the kind of intricacies that he has in his music. They asked me to invite a special guest. I thought of Schofield, just because I had toured with him in the past in his band, and we had played some together, and there wasn't really a recording of us playing together, so I thought that would be kind of a nice keepsake, a nice little memento. And so that was the special guest. Some of the songs, as I was writing them, towards the maybe about a month or so before the recording date, we thought of having like an ensemble on some of the tracks. I had two arrangers help me with that, Vicky Yang and Guillermo Klein, and they did some great arrangements of some tunes and of some of my tunes, and so the album has I suppose for me the album is kind of all the things that I wanted to do that I hadn't been able to do up until this point. So these are like reaching for the things that I had wanted to do in the past but hadn't been able to do yet.
Well, it seems like 2015 was a good year. You were nominated for a Grammy with Gonzalo, too. Talk to me a little bit about that.
That was Gonzalo's record, right? Yeah, Gonzalo is, he's such an amazing musician, formidable piano player and composer, and it's just to be around him is really great. He's an intense musician. There's kind of nobody like him. His music can be quite rhythmically complicated. I mean, it's hard for a gringo like me to keep up with some of the cross rhythms and things that are going on, And so it was a great experience to be involved in that record, and of course all the other musicians in the band too are all really, really great musicians, and I felt really privileged to be a part of that. It was certainly an intense experience. We rehearsed a lot for it, and trying to just even play the music was a challenge. It was the kind of thing where when you're playing it, if you just play your part like with a metronome, it's not so hard. But trying to play your part with all the other parts that are happening at the same time is tricky because there's a lot of one. It doesn't seem like one is in the normal place, So it's easy to lose your footing. If you lose your footing, then you can feel like you don't know where one is, and then it makes playing your part difficult. So it was some of the harder music that I've had to play. Not even so much like so many like notes that are hard, but just the rhythms were hard. And the cross rhythms, what other people were playing, what the bass was playing, what the drums were playing underneath you. It was a challenge, but it was great. It was a great experience.
Explain to me this: how does a guy that was born in England, raised in Vancouver, Canada, living now in Brooklyn, get to a point where you have this full-blown jazz career going? How was your childhood? What was your lineage like?
I grew up in Canada. I moved to Canada when I was young, and I guess I got into music when I was about 7 or 8. I got into violin, and then I liked music. I got into saxophone when I was about 16 or so. Became kind of obsessive with the saxophone for a while there, and I went to Berkeley. I went to college in Boston. I met a lot of people there in Boston who were musicians my age, and I had some great teachers also. And the logical thing after being in Boston, a lot of people ended up going to New York. In jazz, New York is sort of the center for jazz still, So a lot of, there's still a vibrant community of lots of musicians coming here. There's places to play. There's more venues in New York than there are in other places. So it's a kind of a logical choice of a place to go. I didn't necessarily know I was going to stay or anything. I moved here, and I enjoyed being here. And so I did my best to stay, and I was lucky to get a green card. And after getting a green card, I was able to get a citizenship, so I've been able to stay.
Wonderful. So when you were growing up, were there any albums that were hugely influential in the jazz realm that got you kind of going?
One of the first albums that I really loved a lot was this Cannonball Adderley record, Live in San Francisco. A live record, and I could really hear the feeling of the music really came through on that record a lot. Cannonball, of course, is sounding just great. It's a kind of a nice blend of kind of, Cannonball style, especially in that period, there's a little bit of like kind of soul jazz, there's like bluesiness, but there's also bebop and that kind of thing. And his sound is so great, and the groove is so great. Bobby Timmons is on that record, so there's like kind of this bluesy quality to it that I think just was really infectious. Other records that I really liked, of course, Blue Train by Coltrane, Saxophone Colossus by Sonny Rollins. Of course, I was into like Miles. I liked the early Miles. I was listening to like the 50s Miles, Relax and Work and Steam in those records. And but I was listening to. I kind of was open to new things too. I was into this would have been the late 80s, so I was into things that were happening then also, Schofield and Branford Marsalis and Wynton, and Michael Brecker's solo record came out, I think, the year I was in high school, when I was finishing high school. So there was lots of interesting modern music too that inspired me.
Well, and that had to be cool to go and be a part of being around someone like Victor Lewis at Berklee. And then you move on to New York City. What were those early years like for you to be baptized in such a central hub for jazz in the world?
Yeah, I mean, when I moved to New York, I had some people that I knew here already, so that was made it a little bit easier. I was lucky that I recorded with Victor even before I really officially moved to New York, and so I met some people through that. I met Eddie Henderson a little bit through that, and through Eddie Henderson I met Kevin Hayes. I started to jam with Kevin in Brooklyn. Through Kevin, I met Bill Stewart, and I basically played as much as I could at that time, and did a lot of gigs for free or little money, just to kind of gain experience and to meet people. And I think that's an important thing that you have to do in the beginning, is to just is to meet people and play with lots of people and gather as much experience as you can. But one good opportunity often can lead to another one if you make the most of it. And I was lucky to also make my own record fairly early on. I think I made a record with this drummer Billy Drummond. The label, that label, Crisscross Records, asked me about doing one of my own records. So early on, I was able to make a record, which was a lucky thing, and helps. I think if you're able to make some recordings, it helps people hear about you even more.
Absolutely.
Not always necessary, but I mean, if you show up to a gig and you play really well, I mean, then people hear you and they'll call you. Other people will call you, and so you can, if you're looking to be a freelance musician in that respect, just playing really well and showing up in different situations will keep the ball rolling.
Speaking of opportunities, in 2002, you take first place in the Thelonious Monk International Jazz Sax Competition in D.C. That had to be a pretty big door opener, and, of course, you got to play with Wayne Shorter and Herbie Hancock. What was that whole experience like, and the afterglow? I kind of did it just to kind of, I at the time I didn't have any gigs going on, and I thought I would enjoy the opportunity to meet Wayne and Herbie, and I didn't necessarily plan on winning or anything. I treated it like a gig that I could prepare for, and for me it was just a sort of an opportunity to go down and to meet people, and perhaps Wayne and Herbie are two of my biggest idols, and so it was a chance maybe to meet them and to participate in something. It's a little bit tense, like if you dwell on the competitive aspect of it, it can be a little bit because music isn't really a competition. There's often I mean, if you had to pick between Debussy and Ravel, who's better? It's maybe not the point of music, but I tried to treat it like an important gig, and so I just tried to prepare for it as maybe like an athlete trains for an Olympic event or something. I just tried to be focused and train for it, and I just saw that as positive growth, and an opportunity to just do a gig and go down to DC and maybe meet Wayne and Herbie. So I was surprised, actually, that I won. I didn't really anticipate it. I thought, I was surprised. And so in terms of the after, I think initially it helped me some. There were some opportunities that came about afterwards. I don't think it was as big of a, maybe previous years, like maybe when Joshua Redman won it, or there were some other years where perhaps because the industry was in a different position, I didn't really get like a record deal or nothing really. It didn't change in that respect. I think it changed. It was good for me in a subtle way. It was something that I could add to my resume, and it gave me a little bit of exposure to people, and so it was good. But it wasn't necessarily like a life-changing event or anything. It was a very positive experience and something that I definitely will cherish for a long time. I was
certainly, you know, I will always remember, you know, going on stage after they announced the winner and playing a tune with Wayne and Herbie, and it was a great experience.
So let's take your career and kind of stretch it out a little bit. We're looking at about 16 plus albums as a leader, over 70 as a sideman. When you look back over your career, how do you see these levels of productive output? Do you see yourself in an evolution of sound, or what has kind of been the flow of your career as you've evolved as a musician?
I mean, I think in terms of making records, it's just a sort of, I mean, I always have liked trying to write music, and I've always enjoyed leading a band, and so I've tried to continue to do that, and for me that feels like a kind of a necessary process, you know, and that's something that I enjoy. Not everyone likes to compose music, or not everyone likes to try to lead a band or anything. I would say, I guess, you know, I don't necessarily look back. Maybe that's not a good thing, but I don't often look back too much and reflect on what's happened. I'm just kind of usually moving on towards the next thing. And so I have my eyes on trying to make another album and trying to always learn from my mistakes in the past and just trying to make better music. And I suppose I'm influenced, I continually grow as a musician, and I'm influenced by different things, and so sometimes those new sources of inspiration and influence change the way that I am as a musician. They change the way I write, perhaps, and so there is an evolution there, I would say. There's, you know, my style has changed over the years and has grown, and so sometimes maybe when I look back on certain periods, I can hear the changing influences, and I can see the evolution in that. But I think it's interesting to see. I mean, one thing that I notice is I notice that my sound on the saxophone has developed better, has become more full and more beautiful than when I was in my early 20s, you know. I could play the notes and I could kind of play fast and stuff then, but I didn't have as beautiful of a sound back then. So that's something that has been always important to me, and I think has gotten better, you know, over the years. And in terms of my compositional style, I think I've embraced other types of music more, and I've opened up and been more influenced by other types of songwriting and that. And I think that I hear that more in my music now. It doesn't mean that I don't like my older music, but it just means that the influences have changed, and it has perhaps maybe a broader scope. You know?
Absolutely. Well, you know, the one thing that I've noticed too is over your career, you've been a part of a lot of projects. You've been been on 6 of the Grammy-nominated Mingus Band albums. You were a featured guest artist at the International Sax Symposium held by the U.S. Navy. Dave Douglas, John Schofield. What are these projects that you do? How do they develop you as a musician? Are these key to you in your evolution as a jazz musician?
Okay, so playing with Schofield and playing with Dave Douglas, that's me being a sideman and me playing in other people's bands. And those are important steps, I think, to developing as a musician. I think it's, before you lead your own band, it's useful to be in somebody else's band and see how they do it, you know, and you can learn a lot. It's a kind of a bit of an apprentice-like system, you know, where you learn from a master, like that kind of a thing. And so those were good experiences, and I learned a lot, and I'm grateful for certain and the Mingus Band also, you know. It's a necessary step, I think, in order to figure out what your music is and to try to lead your own band. I mean, there are some people that maybe bypass those kinds of steps and just go straight into doing their own thing, child prodigy or somebody like Joey Alexander maybe or something. But it's actually good to take your time and to evolve slowly. It can almost give you a more grounding, and a more solid footing in terms of who you are as a musician and how you want to take on leading a band and creating your own music.
So, there's been the people that you've mentioned. You played with jazz heroes, and you've mentioned influences in your life. If you could get into a time machine and see a jazz musician live, where would you go and who would you see?
Oh, wow. I mean, there's a lot of people. I mean, I have a lot of people that I love, so I mean, I'd love to, hear somebody like Art Tatum play, or I'd love to see Charlie Parker play, or Coltrane play, or I never did get to see Miles play live, that would be amazing. Love to be, front and center row hearing Miles' band or something like that. But I mean, yeah, I have a lot of idols, and a lot of them are dead, but that's what's amazing about having recordings and even things like YouTube. There's so much video and stuff to watch, and although I'm not sure YouTube is both good and bad.
Yeah,
not necessarily. There's a bad side to it too, but yeah, Coltrane, Miles, Charlie Parker, Duke Ellington, those are some people that I would love to go step back and see.
So let me ask you this. As a practitioner of jazz, you spent a lot of years in the idiom. Why do you love jazz?
I think why I like jazz is that it encourages people to be themselves. It encourages people to think on their feet and to improvise and to because I think in life, it's good to be your own person and to have your own thoughts and to develop your own unique ways of doing things. To be a unique person is. I think it's nice to celebrate that. And jazz has that element. You're encouraged to be. A player who has a unique style or a unique sound is often celebrated. Somebody like Monk or something like this, and to be really improvising, to think on your feet, to be able to handle different kinds of situations gracefully in a split second is a great skill, and that can actually apply to all endeavors in life, And what I also like about jazz is the community. The community, you can't play well unless you are playing with a group of people that you like, and so there's a kind of a family kind of community there, a brotherhood, a sisterhood of people that like to play together, and it's necessary to work with other people and to play well with other people, and so these kinds of things are I think positive life experiences that actually can teach you how to enjoy your life and to function well in the world. You got to get along with people. You should think for yourself. These kinds of things. I think maybe perhaps people outside of jazz could be inspired by those things. And take those things, and maybe that could influence them a little bit, But you either love jazz or you don't at all, and you either get it or you don't, and so for those of us who love it, I think those things are important to us, and then there's just the sheer music. The music is, if you like the music, then that's what we're all doing it for, That's what we enjoy, the sounds of the music, and we enjoy things like playing blues and things like singing a ballad, singing a song through your instrument, or touching people emotionally, or inspiring people, or giving people energy from a song that you write or that you play, and I think those things are what give the music a lot of strength, and I think influence. I suppose it's an old music now compared to like different styles that are evolving, and so even though you can hear the influence of it in certain musicians that are maybe pop musicians or something, you can hear the jazz and Stevie Wonder music harmonically and just certain things that he does. I mean, he wrote Sir Duke for Duke Ellington, right? So there's jazz and pop music. You can hear it in even like certain singer styles, like what's the English girl that died too young?
Amy Winehouse.
Amy Winehouse, yeah. I mean, very jazz influence, in her style, the way she sings, and so it continues to be a part of music. Like kind of like hip hop guys like Q-Tip and that they are very much aware of jazz and incorporate jazz flavor and jazz style. He had a song that was like basically giants. It was like a loop of 2 bars of giant steps.
Yeah.
So jazz is still around, and it's still an important music. It's unfortunately it doesn't have the audience that it used to have. It's not a popular music anymore. It's a bit more of a museum music, and it's either that or it's become I'm not. It's a whole other question, I guess. But why is jazz not as popular? It's not as so easy to answer. But there's probably a lot of reasons. But there are still young people that appreciate it, and there are still people playing it, and I mean, it will still find a home as long as there are people making it and playing it, and so it continues.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about those jazz lovers and fans out there. What's one of the best compliments that you've gotten from a fan about your music?
I suppose like when people say, I couldn't stop. I listened to that song so many times, or I love that, or I felt the emotion from that, or it's always surprising. You never always know how music affects people, and sometimes you make it and you forget about it, or you're not aware. But it's nice when people tell me that they've listened to something a million times, or that's one of my favorite songs, or I've listened to that so many times, and that's always a nice compliment, I think.
I'm going to save the best for last here, and I want to ask you this. Everyone has a version of who you are: your family, your friends, the fans, business associates. But when you wake up and face the world, who do you think you are?
I mean, I'm just a regular person, really, and I struggle with many things, just like all people struggle with different things. And I think that's always changing. I go through periods where I might be struggling with something more than at other times. Sometimes I struggle creatively, or I might be struggling financially, or I might be struggling emotionally with different things. So it depends, I suppose. I think there are times where I sometimes feel proud of myself and things that I have achieved, and then other times I feel down on myself and that I have to work harder and that I haven't achieved what I want. So it's a little bit of an illusion sometimes. I think probably what the truth is that it's kind of somewhere in between, There are always, I think, it is a tough business, and so I think, I still struggle to play my own music as a leader, and I struggle getting enough gigs as a leader. Something I'm trying to do more, I struggle with, money and things like that. Jazz is not a lucrative business, so sometimes I question, what I'm doing, and I question, if what I'm doing is the thing that could make me the happiest, But these are all, I think, questions that everybody in their lives ends up asking at certain points, no matter what they do. You always have to question what you're doing and to try to try to live the best life you can live, and to see if it's, to find the meaning in your life, And there are always struggles no matter what you're doing. I mean, even the great artists struggle, or great business people struggle with their companies or struggle with things. There are always problems and challenges. And so I think, when I wake up in the morning, it can vary, what I think.
Yeah.
But I would say that I'm kind of critical about myself. I'm not prone to glowing or resting on my whatever accomplishments I may seem to have. I usually am trying to push forward and trying to do something new and trying to make things better.
I like that answer, man. That's a great way to kind of wrap everything up. Seamus, thank you very much. Good luck with everything.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure to speak with you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Kansas City, London, Canada, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Seamus for his time and his stories and all that music. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store, or visit the Neon Jazz YouTube channel, or for all things Neon Jazz, we're at neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the music, my friends.
Neon Jazz.